Sense, a cyberpunk ghost story. This game was funded through a Kickstarter, so keep that in mind throughout the review. It takes place in the city of Neo Hong Kong in the year 2084, though you won't be there for too long. There are actually very few cyberpunk elements going on in this title, leading me to believe that the inclusion of the subtitle, A Cyberpunk Ghost Story, was meant to capitalize on the success of Cyberpunk 2077. Little did developer Top Hat Studios know that the release of Cyberpunk 2077 would be a massive dumpster fire. This game could have been called Sense, a Ghost Story, but that's not quite as flashy and attention-grabbing, so right off the bat there's an issue with the game's title. Sense is a 2.5D point-and-click adventure-style horror game, paying some homage to the game's Clock Tower and Fatal Frame. I'm playing Sense on a Nintendo Switch, and it was a $20 download. The player controls a character named May, who is heading out for a blind date, and ends up trapped in a haunted apartment building. She has to burn incense, referred to as joss sticks in the game, at altars to ward away the spirits of the dead who linger on each floor. May also needs an item associated with the spirit from when they were alive. If she doesn't have both, she'll have to run and hide, as there's usually not a way to fight back. By equipping Jade Bangles, May essentially gets more lives, meaning she can survive an encounter with a spirit, but the bangle shatters. May uses beta tapes to save, which I think is a fun throwback. The player can actually quick save anywhere on the first playthrough. It's only on a New Game Plus playthrough, when you can't use quick saves, that the tapes are necessary. And there are many spots throughout where death comes down to trial and error. It's only at the very beginning of the game when May is occupying a futuristic-looking world with a science fiction element. There's not really any gameplay here, just some dialogue with NPCs, who will also be absent for most of the game. The apartment building has been preserved from the 1980s, and there are no cyberpunk elements while traversing it, other than the fact that May has cybernetic eyes. On each of the 6 floors, she will collect and use items to solve puzzles that will lead her to the top. Every floor has its story told through items that are collected. The floors become more interesting as you climb higher. It would have been nice to see more characters to interact with, rather than having so much of the story in these long journal entries. It's also kind of weird that someone would only write one entry every several years. I don't mind reading them, but I feel like if players skip these, they won't even know what the game's story is, and this is a visual novel-style game, where the story is kind of the point. The best things this game has going for it are its mood and atmosphere. The art design is anime-inspired, with some generous fan service that faced possible censorship. Though the game does have some well-endowed women, to the point of absurdity, including the main character. I didn't see anything I would call pornographic. No straight-up nudity, just a shot of a character in their underwear and no sex scenes. There's a section called cosplay, but the only options are with or without fur coat, and with or without battle damage, so nothing too perverted here. There's some gore in this game as well, for the many times that a trap or a ghost will take out May, though these are told through still images. The artwork does look good here, though there are some issues hampering this title. In the main game, the graphics look blurry on the main character, and the frame rate dips heavily in some large rooms, causing this game to stagger along at times. Also, tapping twice to run frequently does not work for me, which is pretty frustrating. I really think these things should have been ironed out before release. Man, I feel like I'm talking about the other Cyberpunk game now. Also, there are loading screens every time you enter another room, and though they are quick loading screens, they are way too frequent. Sense's soundtrack is mostly silent with occasional creaking noise for atmosphere's sake, though as May climbs the apartment building, some bubbling ambient synth music is dropped in more often to build dramatic tension. The developers introduced some combat elements and a few boss fights, which play out about as awkwardly as you'd expect in a point-and-click style game. When I played the game, I was using a joystick to move around, so it's not literally a point-and-click. These mechanics are introduced halfway through the game, and they aren't used a lot. With several jade bangles, I was able to stumble my way through these fights, but the hit detection isn't great, and it all feels pretty clumsy. You have to throw warding rice before attacking by clicking in a menu screen. That being said, it gives a little variety and excitement to the gameplay. This game was supposed to take 5 hours to beat, although it took me twice that long because I'm a big dummy who got stuck on one of the game's puzzles. I went up and down searching the floors of the building, exhausting every possibility, until there were only 2 things I could even click on: an empty set of bottles that never seemed to be used for anything, and a door with a code. If you find yourself out of possibilities, it's time to read the journal entries to find the door code. As long as you know this, you shouldn't get stuck, but sometimes it's not as simple as the numbers being directly written down in the journal. Let's just say spoilers for the next 2 sections, because I'm going to talk about the puzzles and the story. May can't pick up items until she knows that she needs them, which makes for a lot of backtracking to stretch the gameplay out. Upon reaching the 3rd floor, May falls down to the 1st, and you have to work your way back up again. By the way, at this vending machine in the laundry room, don't buy the soda, because soda kills you. When you interact with an object and you have the correct item, the game will give you an option to use it. You don't have to go through your inventory and try out every item. This game has some of that point-and-click absurdity, like when you can't reach over to grab a thermometer, so you have to find a back-scratching tool, and then you still can't reach, so you have to grab a ruler out of a child's backpack, which you've clicked on a dozen times and found nothing. If you do intend on playing this game, you probably shouldn't look up the answers to the puzzles, because the puzzles are most of the gameplay. That being said, I looked up a hint to solve a puzzle. Yes, hanging my head in shame right now. And also, I'm going to be giving away answers to puzzles, which contradicts what I just said. But I'd like to talk about my complete gameplay experience, so I feel it's necessary. I was stuck for an hour one night at this door, and I had other games I wanted to get to. The first door code was written down directly in the journal, easy. But for the second, I explored every floor for an answer I already had. I actually found this hint from the game's developer, and I instantly knew what to do. This picture in my journal has a telephone with colors over the numbers, and the door has the same colors. Match the colors and the numbers. Easy. The next one I already knew to think outside the box. On this one, you have to cut the hair in sequence at certain directions. There's an entire floor covered with hair, and it's pretty creepy. The ghost on this floor worked in a salon in the basement. The directions to cut are the same as this move from a fighting game that is circled in the PDA. Your PDA is basically your smartphone. It's where the journals are stored. The next time I hit a wall was on floor 4, where this mad doctor was experimenting on corpses. He chases May around with a giant drill. I had just gotten some fillings the same day I was playing this, and the sound of the drill was not pleasant. But before you reach the secret room that unleashes him, you have to solve a puzzle, and I refuse to look up any more hints at this point. So if you find this missing book for the shelf, it gives you a sequence of numbers. 3, 1, 6, 5, 7, 2, 4. And on the X-ray table, there are the same numbers in a different order. 7, 4, 1, 3, 5, 2, 6, with 7, 1, 5, and 2 highlighted. The door code was 4 digits long, so I tried 7, 1, 5, 2, which didn't work. So I lined up the 2 sets and entered the numbers from the other sequence that matched 7, 1, 5, 2. The numbers 3, 6, 7, 2. That also didn't work. I thought maybe I have to go in order from the 7th number to the 1st number to the 5th number, and then to the 2nd number of the 2nd sequence, making 4, 3, 7, 1, which also did not work. I tried doing this order with the first sequence as well, giving me 6, 7, 5, 4, which again didn't work. I kind of expected that it wouldn't. I tried counting from right to left instead of from left to right, making 3, 4, 6, 2. Also didn't work. I tried removing the non-highlighted numbers on sequence 1 from sequence 2, making 1, 5, 7, 2. And hey, that actually worked.
Perfect.
This is definitely the puzzle that took me the most attempts. There's also a puzzle where the answer is Sally's birthday, which can be figured out by doing the math from the journal entry. As far as the story, the main goal is to escape the haunted apartment building. But there are a lot of smaller stories told through journal entries. Honestly, I am unsure the exact details of the story, but from what I gathered, someone was practicing dark arts and unleashed evil spirits. The first floor contains the salon, laundry room, and leasing office. You'll have to backtrack here again and again. If you find taped messages, May can play them in the salon, but they don't seem to contain much info and aren't even translated into English.
死八婆，你喺我屋企人背後講嗰啲咩大話，講嗰啲咩廢話，你自己心。
The second floor is where you'll find Edward Shu's room. I think he was in charge of the building and was an immigrant who found success and was sending money back home. In room 206, the ghost of a young girl lingers, and apparently Edward was stalking her. I believe this is a girl named Tracy McCullough. There's also a guy named Ton or Tony Wen, who is mentioned in some police reports. He suffered mental trauma, and he was Tracy's lost brother. There's some info about 2 orphan siblings, and he was definitely one of them. Then there's this line from this police letter addressed to Tracy that says, "I guess I should update your name in my file to Wen." In the crawl space of Tony's apartment, there is a peephole looking into Tracy's room, leading me to believe that Tony chose this apartment after finding out that Tracy was his sister and was using this peephole to spy on her. Though these actions are definitely creepy, in the end you set his spirit free. His apartment also has a machine that makes keys. That's pretty creepy too. Edward Shu was one of the few people, along with the Fongs, Huang, and Father Yip, who knew about the evil spirits in the building. The third floor is where you get your sword, the Taomu, and learn about exorcism. The story here has something to do with a girl named Suk Yi, who had spiritual abilities. When you run into her in the hall, don't refuse to play rock, paper, scissors with her, or you'll die. After finding all the pieces to this feng shui mirror, there's a mini-game where you have to rotate a maze to get a ball into a hole. It's not too hard to figure out. The spirit that gives you the sword and teaches you exorcism is Sifu Gao, the teacher of Fu Fong. Fu and his wife Su adopted their niece Su Qi after her parents died, and they appear to be benevolent spirits. This floor is also home to a college student named Kevin, who, after witnessing a shooting, was being psychologically tortured and cut out his own tongue, ear, and eyes. May is able to set his poor spirit free. The fourth floor has the Mad Dr. Lai, the guy who chases you around with the drill, and this is where the game felt most like Clock Tower to me. This floor also contains Mariko's room. She's a hairstylist that worked in the salon and was going through a divorce, explaining all of the hair on the walls here, I guess. The fifth floor has a woman named Sally, who had excessive plastic surgery done and is portrayed as being incredibly insecure and highly sexual. May has to battle robot dolls in her room, lifeless objects possessed by evil spirits, or even the spirit of Sally herself. She had a relationship with an uncommonly tall man named Zhang, nicknamed Lamppost, who is very kind but shy. He helps you get up to the next floor. There's also a woman on this floor named Maddie Mao, who was frenemies with Sally, and she was dating a guy named Harold, who abused her. These characters are portrayed as pretty shallow tropes, especially when it comes to the female characters of Sally and Maddie. Floor 6 is home to Father Yip of the White Tiger clan, so there was some criminal activity going on, as well as supernatural shenanigans. Yip was providing Lai with corpses of Yakuza members to experiment on. This floor is also home to Huang, a student of Fu Fong, who became consumed with the dark arts. He was also having trouble controlling one of his puppets. Could it have been Sally, who appeared like a puppet on the previous floor? The seventh and final floor is simply a boss fight with a woman named Fei Fei, who seduced a guy named Brian to use him in an occult ceremony. Fei Fei is the daughter of the crime lord Yip, and she was possessed by evil spirits. Several of the other characters had planned on an exorcism, but It must have failed. It's really hard to keep all these characters straight when they're mostly just names and journal entries that don't always provide a lot of context. When you see the ghost in the game, it's not always immediately obvious which character it's supposed to be. There is a gun that you get near the end, but it's only used in a cutscene, which is disappointing. There are collectible images of ghosts called Shinrei spots, and I didn't use a guide if one even exists, so I missed a bunch of them. There's also an epilogue where you play as May's sister and go back into the building to find out what happened. It's very scripted and there's not much exploration, but it does offer another glimpse of the cyberpunk world outside of the 1980s apartment building. The ending of the game is a little unclear. At the end of the Fei fight, the spirit of a mysterious woman appears. This might be Su Fong, I'm not sure. May uses her gun to fight off some evil spirits, then the police break down the door. When investigating the same room as May's sister, Maiko, she catches a glimpse of May being pulled into the darkness. It ends with a shot of May in a hospital bed hooked up to a VR headset. Does this insinuate that May herself is now possessed? Or was the whole experience a virtual one because of her cybernetic eyes? After beating the game, there are 2 new costumes for May to wear. One of them, called Ki Pao, puts May in an elegant dress, and the other, Net Diver May, puts her in a futuristic bodysuit with VR headgear. Also, let me mention that back at the beginning of the game, you were supposed to be going on a date, and you do eventually find the PDA of the person that sent you the message, and then a ghost appears. So I'm not sure if the ghost sent you the message to go on the date, or if the person that sent you the message to go on the date ended up in the haunted apartment building and got pulled into the darkness. Again, I'm not really sure. There's also a secret ending for beating the game multiple times, which I will probably never get to because I don't see the point of playing through again, at least not anytime soon. I mean, the puzzles and traps will all be the same. I personally didn't think the game was quite worth the $20 admission price, but if it goes on sale, it might be worth checking out if you're interested in East Asian ghost lore or if you have nostalgia for point-and-click adventures like I do. Oh yeah, and don't mess with cats unless you have a toy mouse. And don't mess with birds unless you have firecrackers. And don't jump out of this window because you'll die.